It all started on a regular Tuesday afternoon, one of those days where everything feels just normal enough to be forgettable. A crowded park, the usual noise of children playing, parents on benches half watching, half scrolling through their phones. But then came her, a woman with a sharp voice, pristine clothes, and eyes that seemed to scan for imperfection. She wasn't a stranger to the neighborhood, but she sure acted like she owned it. When she spotted a mother trying to calm her two spirited kids, she didn't hold back. Loud enough for everyone to hear, she criticized their lack of discipline, accused the mother of poor parenting, and even suggested that people like her shouldn't bring kids to public places if they can't control them. And just like that, a private moment of parenting turned into public humiliation. Phones came out. The video went viral. But what nobody expected, what you won't believe, is what happened when the internet did some digging into this woman's past. Before we go further, I want you to pause and ask yourself something. Have you ever seen someone snap judge a stranger in public? Maybe on a plane, in a restaurant, at a grocery store? We live in a time where everything is caught on camera, and people rush to take sides before the full picture ever comes out. But this story? This one's different. Because what started as a viral Karen moment quickly turned into something much, much darker. In the next few minutes, I'm going to take you on a journey that starts with a scolding in the park, but ends in a way no one saw coming. If you've clicked on this video wondering who she was, what she did, or why this moment spiraled into an internet investigation, trust me, you're about to get every answer you're searching for. But not all at once. The truth isn't just shocking. It's layered, and the deeper we go, the more you'll start questioning what's real, who's right, and how many secrets a single person can hide behind a perfect smile. Now, I want you to stay with me, not just because this story is wild, which it is, but because it says something about us. About how quickly we judge, how easily we believe what we see online, and how some people spend years hiding in plain sight. If you're a parent, if you've ever been judged unfairly, or if you've ever looked at someone and thought, there's more to this story, then you're going to feel every beat of what's coming next. I'm not just telling you a viral headline. I'm telling you a story with real people, real consequences, and a twist that might just change how you look at viral videos forever. Let's talk about her for a second. Let's call her Denise. That's not her real name, but it's close enough. In the clip, she looks composed, almost elegant, as she points and scolds. She's got that confident tone that makes people listen even when they don't want to. But here's the thing. When this video blew up and people started sharing it on Facebook, TikTok, Reddit, and even true crime forums, a few eagle-eyed users noticed something oddly familiar. A voice, a scar, a piece of jewelry, tiny details that lit a spark. And then it all unraveled. Within 48 hours, someone posted a screenshot from a decade-old local news segment. The comments exploded. Some were in disbelief. Others were furious. The woman who shamed another mom in a park was now being linked to a story no one thought would ever resurface again. A story involving missing records, sealed court documents, and a forgotten foster care case that should have stayed buried. Think about this. How many people do you pass by every day without knowing who they really are? How many times have you seen a clip go viral and taken it at face value, never once thinking, what if there's more to this? I'm going to walk you through everything the internet found, the breadcrumbs they followed, the names they unearthed, and the one moment that flipped the narrative upside down. And I promise, by the end of this video, you're going to have a completely different picture of who Denise really is and why that single outburst in the park may have been less about parenting and more about hiding. If you're still here, I want you to do one thing. Watch closely. Every detail matters. Every clue leads somewhere. You're not just a viewer right now, you're part of this investigation. And what we find together is going to change more than just one woman's reputation. It's going to show just how fast the internet can uncover the truth, and how sometimes, even that truth is only the beginning. Because the next person to recognize Denise wasn't just some commenter. It was someone who hadn't seen her face in 20 years, not since the day their life was torn apart. And that's where everything really begins. In the weeks leading up to the viral park incident, Denise had been living what most people would describe as a seemingly quiet, suburban life. She resided in a mid-sized neighborhood just outside of Columbus, Ohio, one of those planned communities with manicured lawns, HOA newsletters, and rows of homes that all looked just a little too similar. Her presence in the neighborhood wasn't exactly warm or neighborly, but she wasn't disliked either. People knew her as the woman who keeps to herself, always appearing just polished enough to avoid suspicion, yet distant enough to leave questions unanswered. She drove a late-model SUV, volunteered at the local library's fundraising events, and occasionally baked store-bought cookies for her daughter's middle school class, always with a smile, always with perfect timing. But behind that curated image was a woman who avoided deep connections, skipped small talk with other parents, and seemed allergic to any questions about her past. To most, she was just another face in the crowd. But to one person online, the second they saw that video, everything clicked, and what they remembered was not her face, but her voice. It was a Reddit user, someone who had been following true crime threads for over a decade, who made the first real connection. In a comment buried under hundreds of others, they claimed the woman in the park sounded eerily similar to a witness interviewed in a forgotten cold case involving a foster child who disappeared in 2005. The case, which barely made national news back then, involved a 5-year-old girl placed in emergency care after her biological parents were deemed unfit. The foster mother at the time, referred to only as Ms. D in court documents, had reported the girl missing during a chaotic holiday weekend. The child was never found. Authorities investigated the home, interviewed neighbors, and ultimately ruled it as an unresolved disappearance with no charges filed. The case had grown cold, the foster family had reportedly moved, and eventually, the story slipped into obscurity. But now, with the internet's collective attention laser-focused on Denise, questions were bubbling to the surface. Could she be the same Ms. D? Was this just a wild coincidence, or had the algorithm finally brought an old ghost back into the light? While some dismissed the theory as just another case of internet sleuths connecting dots that weren't really there, others took it further. A side-by-side analysis of the two women's facial features began to circulate. Grainy screenshots of the 2005 local news footage were matched against high-res stills from the viral park video. The resemblance was disturbing, not exact, but close enough to stir unease. And yet, in typical internet fashion, the attention quickly split. Some users began digging into Denise's current life, looking for any slip-up, any connection to the missing girl. Others insisted it was all a witch hunt, pointing out that the woman in the old footage had a different hair color, different mannerisms, even a slight southern accent that wasn't present in the park confrontation. But none of that stopped the speculation. If anything, it made the mystery grow teeth. Meanwhile, Denise herself didn't say a word. No public statement, no interview, not even a social media post addressing the video. Her accounts went dark within days of the video surfacing, and neighbors reported seeing her less and less. One parent from the school carpool group claimed she had started wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, even when walking her dog. Another swore she noticed Denise changing her license plate the day after the video hit Twitter. And then came the most chilling piece of the puzzle. A local real estate agent mentioned anonymously in a Facebook group that Denise had recently inquired about selling quickly, preferably off-market. No explanation, no reason given. Just an urgency that didn't match her normally composed demeanor. But here's where things get even murkier. As the internet kept digging, new characters began to emerge, people from her past who seemed to disappear just as quickly as they were mentioned. An ex-husband whose name was redacted from public records. A former employer who described her as professional but detached and claimed she left the job abruptly after a dispute about her background check. A neighbor from her previous address who recalled a young girl living in the house for a few months, maybe longer, before suddenly vanishing. No moving truck, no goodbye, just gone. All of this was circumstantial, of course. But in stories like these, it's not always about what's proven. It's about what feels off. And with Denise, everything was starting to feel off. Still, not all leads pointed in the same direction. Some internet detectives started to focus on the woman she had shamed in the park, the mother of the 2 children. Let's call her Rachel. At first, Rachel seemed like the clear victim in the video. embarrassed, overwhelmed, trying to keep her cool as Denise chastised her in front of dozens of strangers. But once Rachel's identity became public, things took another unexpected turn. Her social media showed posts about protecting kids from toxic adults, cryptic mentions of having seen her before, and even a few vague comments that suggested she wasn't entirely surprised by the encounter. Was it possible that Rachel recognized Denise? Could this confrontation have been more than just a random clash between strangers? And then there's the matter of the park itself. According to several locals, Denise rarely visited that area. It wasn't close to her home, and it wasn't part of her routine. In fact, no one remembered seeing her there before the day of the incident. So, why was she there that afternoon? Was it really just coincidence? Or was she looking for someone? Trying to hide in plain sight? Or worse, was someone looking for her? As more layers continue to unfold, the internet isn't just asking who Denise really is. They're asking what else she's hiding, who else might be involved, and how many years this woman has spent running from something. Because if there's one thing this story has proven so far, it's that what you see in a single viral video is rarely the whole story. And as more pieces start falling into place, the truth is beginning to look less like a misunderstanding and more like the comeback of a case that never truly died. But just when it feels like we're getting closer to the truth, a new witness steps forward. Someone who hasn't spoken in over 15 years. And what they remember could change everything we think we know about Denise, or destroy what's left of her carefully constructed world. Just when the internet thought it had a solid grip on Denise's unraveling story, everything took a sharp, unsettling turn. For days, speculation had built up like wildfire, with true crime YouTubers dissecting every frame of the park video, podcasts digging through court records, and Reddit sleuths connecting dots from old foster care reports. It felt like the truth was just one post away, until, without warning, one of the most crucial pieces of evidence vanished. A local forum moderator, who had uploaded archived news footage from 2005 that many believed featured Denise under a different name, suddenly took it down. No explanation, no follow-up post, nothing. Within hours, threads discussing the cold case began disappearing too. Users reported messages being flagged, accounts temporarily locked, even DM threats from burner profiles telling them to let it go. What started as an internet manhunt began to feel like something or someone was actively erasing the trail. It wasn't just a matter of losing momentum, it was as if the investigation was being silenced in real time. Meanwhile, Rachel, the woman who had been shamed in the park, started acting strangely too. At first, she was vocal, sharing her side of the incident on Instagram, thanking strangers for their support, even reposting news coverage. But then, just as more people began to speculate about her connection to Denise, she pulled back entirely. Her profiles went private. She stopped answering questions. And most bizarre of all, she posted a single, now deleted message that read, "Some truths are better left in the past." Screenshots of it went viral, spawning dozens of theories. Had she been warned? Paid off? Or had she known all along who Denise really was? The idea that Rachel wasn't just a random mom in the wrong place at the wrong time added an entirely new layer to the mystery. If she and Denise had history, why pretend they were strangers in the park? And why act surprised if the outburst was more personal than it appeared? But just as this new theory began gaining traction, a man came forward claiming to be Denise's former coworker from over a decade ago. He didn't want to show his face, but he agreed to speak anonymously through a video interview. What he shared was more than unsettling, it was cryptic. He described Denise, back when she worked under a different name, as someone with a past she never talked about, and a habit of watching others closely, almost obsessively. He recalled one incident where she was caught going through a coworker's personnel file after hours. When confronted, she simply said she was checking for safety, though no complaint was ever officially filed. But the most chilling part? He said she had once confided in him that she wasn't who people thought she was, and that sometimes people like us have to disappear before the past finds us. At the time, he thought it was just strange office talk. Now, he wasn't so sure. Still, even his claims didn't come without complications. As more people tried to verify his identity, strange inconsistencies began to surface. Records showed someone matching his name had been involved in a fraud investigation years earlier. Nothing related to Denise directly, but enough to cast doubt. Was he a reliable source, or someone trying to stir the pot for attention? Could he be another player in this twisted web, or just another red herring thrown into the mix to mislead and confuse? The community was divided. Some believed him entirely, pointing out that his story aligned with Denise's pattern of secrecy. Others said it was too convenient, too timed, too perfect. In a story already overflowing with contradictions, now even the truth seemed to be wearing a mask. Behind all the chaos, one thread kept resurfacing, an old foster care file supposedly sealed by court order in 2006. Multiple amateur sleuths claimed to have seen references to it before it was scrubbed from public access. According to one tipster, the file listed a missing child as reunified with kin, though no specific names were mentioned. That one line alone raised alarms. If the child was returned to a family member, why was there never a follow-up? Why did the story vanish so quietly? And who exactly was this kin? Someone from Denise's life, or someone who helped her cover things up? The more questions were asked, the fewer answers seemed available, like the truth itself was hiding in plain sight, just outside the reach of certainty. And then came the package. A small, unmarked envelope arrived at the home of a popular YouTuber covering the story, postmarked from a rural town in Kentucky. Inside was a photograph, faded, creased, and clearly old. It showed a young girl standing on a porch next to a woman who bore an eerie resemblance to Denise, only younger and with different hair. On the back of the photo was a single line scrawled in red ink. Ask her about Melinda. No last name, no return address, no explanation. The video revealing the envelope racked up millions of views within days, with hashtag #WhoIsMelinda trending on TikTok and thousands of users trying to identify the girl or trace the origins of the image. But so far, no one's been able to confirm who she is or what she has to do with the story. And just when things couldn't get more complicated, the YouTuber who received the photo posted one final update, saying someone had broken into their car that night. Nothing was taken. No windows smashed. But the envelope? Gone. Every trace of it, along with the original photo. Just like that, the one physical clue tying Denise to something deeper, something older, had vanished. As the days go by and the theories pile up, one thing becomes more and more clear. This isn't just about a woman lashing out in a park. This is about a past carefully buried, a network of silence, and a story that someone out there desperately doesn't want you to finish. Because the more we dig, the more it seems that Denise isn't the only one hiding something. And if the name Melinda really is the missing key, then what happens when someone finally finds her? Just as the name Melinda began taking over comment sections, trending hashtags, and late-night TikTok theories, another development jolted the investigation into even deeper waters. A high school teacher in Dayton, just an hour's drive from where Denise currently lived, came forward after recognizing the woman from the viral video. She didn't go public at first. Instead, she messaged a YouTube content creator anonymously, saying she had seen Denise under a different name nearly 7 years ago. At that time, she was known as Carla Morton and had briefly worked as a substitute in the school's front office. According to this teacher, Carla, or Denise, was quiet, polite, and always carried a worn leather notebook that she never let out of her sight. No one thought anything of it until one afternoon, after school hours, a janitor found her in the staff break room, crying and clutching the notebook. She said she had seen someone she wasn't supposed to, and by the next morning, she was gone. No resignation, no notice, just an empty chair and a name removed from the registry. When asked what made her come forward now, the teacher replied, "I think Melinda was one of our students." That one line shook everything. Melinda wasn't just a name from Denise's past. She might have been someone right there, someone real and living in the same town, someone who had already crossed paths with her long before the internet started digging. But here's the complication that made things even more twisted. The school's records for that year were accidentally purged during a district database migration. Student lists, faculty logs, visitor sign-ins, all gone. That might have been brushed off as a technical hiccup, but now it felt deliberate. And when one true crime podcaster requested district records under the Freedom of Information Act, they received a generic denial citing student privacy laws and unavailable documentation. It was as if someone wanted to erase that entire year from public knowledge. Then came the phone call. The YouTuber who'd received the original envelope, now fully engulfed in this web of secrets, was contacted by someone using a scrambled voice filter. The caller gave no name, just a cryptic message. Melinda isn't who you think she is. She was never the victim. The call lasted just 20 seconds and left more questions than answers. What did that mean? Was Melinda not the missing girl? Was she involved in something else, something darker? Had Denise been running from her, not because of her? Theories exploded online. Some believed Melinda was the child in the 2005 foster case, grown up and possibly still alive. Others speculated she was never a child at all, but an adult using a false identity to entrap Denise. And a growing number of users believed this had less to do with foster care and more to do with some form of long-term manipulation or hidden abuse. Meanwhile, someone else entered the picture, a man named Glenn, claiming to be Denise's estranged brother. He posted a short video on a smaller platform, stating he hadn't seen or spoken to Denise in over 20 years, but recognized her immediately when the park video surfaced. His story was quiet, almost rehearsed, and riddled with pauses. He said they grew up in foster care themselves, bouncing from home to home after their mother's disappearance. But the part that drew the most attention was when he mentioned a specific phrase Denise used to repeat when they were kids. "We have to hide, or they'll find us like they found Mom." It was the first time anyone mentioned their mother, and suddenly, viewers weren't just asking about a missing child from 2005. They were wondering what happened to an entire generation of this family. Who exactly had found their mother? Was she missing? Dead? On the run? But even Glenn's motives weren't immune to scrutiny. Within hours of posting, users found that he had previously served time for identity theft and fraud, including a charge for impersonating a government worker. Some said he was trying to cash in on the story, but others argued he might actually hold the missing link in a multi-generational mystery. And then, as if to fuel the chaos, a new image began circulating on a private Discord server, another old photo, showing Denise as a teenager next to a middle-aged woman whose face had been circled in red. The words, "Is this the MOM?" were scrawled in the top corner, but no one could confirm the woman's identity. Within an hour, the image was pulled from the server by moderators citing external pressure. No one's been able to trace where it came from. While the world fixated on these twists, back in Columbus, neighbors said they hadn't seen Denise, or her daughter, in nearly a week. Her mailbox overflowed. Her curtains stayed drawn. One neighbor swore they saw a dark SUV idling near her driveway 2 nights in a row, engine running but headlights off. Another claimed she saw a man approach the house in the early morning hours, only to leave without knocking after pacing for nearly 10 minutes. Whether it was paranoia, coincidence, or something more, no one could be sure. But the silence coming from that house was deafening. And now, there's one last piece. An anonymous user posted a heavily redacted screenshot that appeared to be from an internal child welfare investigation. In it, the name Melinda appears next to a case number and a brief note, "Transferred to private placement, status unknown." That line, buried in a sea of legal jargon, has sent shockwaves through online forums. What does private placement mean in this context? Was Melinda handed over to someone with power? Someone who could make records disappear? Was Denise part of something bigger, something hidden by layers of bureaucracy and sealed files? Right now, the pieces of this puzzle are scattered, incomplete, and twisting in ways no one expected. What started as a video of a woman scolding a stranger in a park has turned into something deeper, something where every new clue seems to contradict the last. The more we learn, the less we know who to trust. And somewhere out there, Melinda, whoever she is, might be the only person who can finally tell the truth. But if that truth ever surfaces, will it bring justice, or will it reveal a darkness no one's ready to face? It was just after midnight when Denise heard the sound. Not loud, not obvious, just the faint, rhythmic crunch of gravel under slow, deliberate footsteps outside her window. She froze where she stood in the hallway, holding a half-folded laundry basket, every hair on her arms rising. Her house was tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Columbus, a neighborhood where motion sensor lights and porch cams had replaced neighborhood watches, and yet none of them were going off. No dog barked. No floodlight burst on. But someone or something was out there. For the first time in weeks, the fear that had only lived in the digital world, buried in Reddit threads and comment sections, stepped fully into her reality. She didn't move. She barely breathed. And then, just as suddenly as the sound came, it stopped. The next morning, her back porch door was slightly ajar. Just a crack, as if someone had pulled it open and gently let it fall back without clicking shut. Nothing was stolen. Nothing broken. But the potted plant she always kept on the steps had been moved exactly 6 inches to the left. She measured it. Twice. It was just enough to be noticeable, just enough to say, "I was here." That was the moment she stopped thinking of this as a mystery to solve. It was something else now. She was being hunted, and the person or people watching her wanted her to know it. Denise called the police, of course. She did what any rational person would do. An officer came out, took a quick report, walked around the property, and told her, in that practiced voice designed to calm and dismiss, that it was probably neighborhood kids or an animal. She tried to explain the plant, the silence, the feeling. The officer smiled politely, said to keep her doors locked, and offered to have a cruiser swing by the street every few nights. That was it. No real investigation. No follow-up. And by that night, the cruiser never came. It wasn't until the next day that she noticed something worse. Her daughter, Ava, was missing. Not missing in the conventional way. She hadn't been taken. But she wasn't answering her phone. Her location was turned off. She hadn't come home from her after-school club, and none of her friends had seen her. Denise's texts went unread. Her calls rang out. The school hadn't called, and when Denise reached them directly, they told her Ava had checked out early, with a note supposedly signed by Denise herself. That was impossible. She hadn't sent a note. She hadn't given permission. And when she asked to see the paper, the school's secretary hesitated, then said it had already been filed and shredded. The weight of it all collapsed on her like cold water. She staggered outside to her car and opened the glove box, digging beneath the owner's manual where she kept the old leather-bound notebook she hadn't touched in over a decade. It had survived every move, every chapter of her new life, and until now, she'd convinced herself it was just a relic. But the names inside, the ones she used to repeat under her breath like a spell, had suddenly returned, raw and vivid. Melinda, Carla, Daniel, Gloria. The names of caseworkers, of homes, of people who were supposed to protect her and never did. She flipped to the final page. There, scratched faintly in pencil, was a phrase she didn't remember writing. "If they find her, they'll find me." Denise's hands were shaking now. She knew this wasn't about a video anymore. It wasn't about online outrage or comments or clout. Someone had crossed the barrier between story and reality, and the person they were after wasn't a name on a forum. It was her. She started to drive, unsure where to go, unsure what came next. Every car behind her felt like it followed too long. Every turn she made was echoed by another set of headlights. She thought about going to the police again, but what would she say? That her daughter had vanished with a forged note? That someone had moved a flower pot? That her teenage diary might hold answers to a threat she couldn't define? She pulled into a gas station on the edge of town and sat in the car until the engine went cold. That's when she noticed it. A folded piece of paper tucked under her windshield wiper. She stepped out, heart pounding, and unfolded it with numb fingers. No words, just a grainy printed photo. It was of her, standing in her kitchen, clearly taken through the window. She was holding a mug and staring off to the side, unaware, vulnerable. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible in the shadows, was a silhouette. Not hers. Not Ava's. Someone else. Watching. She collapsed back into the driver's seat, breath shallow, pulse hammering. It was real. All of it. And if someone could get that close to her without her knowing, if someone could pull her daughter out of school using a name she thought she'd buried, then they already knew everything. Her past, her aliases, her movements, and most terrifying of all, her weakness. It wasn't just about Melinda anymore. This was something bigger, something older, and it was finally circling back to Colette. But the question she couldn't stop asking, the one that clung to her mind like static, was the one she was most afraid to answer. Had she done something worth running from? Or was she simply the last thread in a story someone else didn't want retold? And then her phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo of Ava, sleeping, in a place Denise didn't recognize. The timestamp read 3:03 a.m. That was 4 hours ago. And just like that, the game had changed. The knock came just after sunrise. Denise, barely awake and still wrapped in a blanket on her living room floor, flinched at the sound. It wasn't the cautious tap of a neighbor or the firm rapping of a cop. It was urgent, like someone knocking not just to be heard, but to be let in before it was too late. She crept to the door, heart hammering, and peeked through the blinds. The person standing there made her stomach drop. It was Eliza, her childhood caseworker. The one she hadn't seen since she was 16. The one who vanished without explanation the same week Denise was moved to her final foster home. And now, almost 20 years later, she was standing on her doorstep, looking older but still unmistakably the same. Denise hesitated, unsure if this was real, unsure if she could trust her. But something about the way Eliza glanced over her shoulder, like she was afraid of being seen, made Denise open the door without a word. Eliza stepped inside and locked the door behind her. She didn't say hello, didn't ask how Denise had been. Instead, she handed her a flash drive and whispered, "They're watching the school. They've been watching for years. You need to see what's on this before it's too late." Denise stared at the device in her hand, then back at Eliza, who now looked completely unraveled, exhausted, paranoid, and running on fear. "Why now?" Denise asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why after all these years?" Eliza didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled a folded document from her coat pocket and handed it over. It was a sealed record, one Denise had never seen before, marked confidential in bold red lettering. And stamped across the top was a name she hadn't heard in decades. Ava Grayson. Not her daughter's name, hers. Her birth name. The one she changed after the adoption. The one she thought was buried with her old life. But here it was, printed clearly and unmistakably on a file that shouldn't even exist anymore. That was when Denise saw it. Beneath her name was another, faintly typed but still visible. A second birth certificate. One that showed Ava wasn't just her daughter. She was her sister. The room tilted. For a moment, Denise felt the ground slip from beneath her. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Ava was born when Denise was in her 20s. She remembered carrying her, raising her, holding her as a baby. But Eliza's eyes told a different story, one Denise didn't want to believe. "You were part of a trial," Eliza said slowly. "Back when you were still a ward of the state. They took children with certain psychological markers, resilience, trauma processing, memory suppression, and ran experiments. You were one of them. You just don't remember because they didn't want you to." Denise shook her head, but pieces were already snapping together. Her fragmented childhood, the blank years she thought were just repressed, the recurring dreams she had of walking through sterile hallways filled with mirrors, doctors, needles. According to Eliza, Ava wasn't born from Denise's body. She was placed with her. The result of another girl in the same program, someone who died under suspicious circumstances. Denise had been chosen because her mind could be manipulated. Her memories had been rewritten. And every photo, every document that proved otherwise had been carefully curated by the agency, one that no longer officially existed. "They knew you'd start remembering eventually," Eliza said. "And when you did, they'd come to clean it up." That's what the photos were. That's what the message meant. Ava had never truly vanished. She'd been retrieved. Denise plugged the flash drive into her old laptop and watched in silence as a series of video files began to load, grainy surveillance footage from what looked like medical observation rooms. And there she was, a younger Denise, maybe 10 years old, sitting quietly in a white chair, responding to questions with practiced calm. In the background, through the mirrored glass, voices argued. "She's perfect for Phase 3, one man said. "Let's see how she bonds when we introduce the sister." That clip ended. Another began. A hospital delivery room. A baby being handed off. And then, years later, footage of a toddler Ava asleep in a small room, a monitor tracking her vitals. "We'll give her to subject 4 to 13. If the bond holds, the cycle can continue." Denise's hands were trembling as she clicked through the files. She didn't recognize half of what she saw, but the timestamps, the names, the faces, they were real. Too real. Her entire life had been a lie. Her motherhood wasn't natural. It had been orchestrated. And now, with Ava missing, the only thing left to determine was whether they were taking her back, or starting the experiment over. But just when she thought she couldn't handle more, the last file opened. It was labeled Contingency. It showed Eliza in what looked like an interrogation room, seated across from an older man in a lab coat. He was calm. "Cold," he said one sentence before the video cut to black. "If subject 4 to 13 learns the truth too early, we activate the replacement protocol." And that was the moment Denise realized the real danger wasn't that Ava was gone. The real danger was that she might not be the only Ava out there. The knock hadn't even faded before Denise turned to Eliza, her voice shaking with something deeper than fear, rage, betrayal, desperation. "How long have you known?" she asked, her eyes locked on the woman she once saw as her only protector. Eliza hesitated just a second too long. It was enough. Denise's chest tightened. The floor beneath her felt unreal, and suddenly she was seeing her entire life as a staged performance. "I didn't know everything," Eliza replied, but the words fell flat. "But you knew something," Denise spat. "And you left me in it. You let me believe she was mine." Eliza's lips pressed together. No defense. "I wasn't allowed to help you," she finally whispered. They threatened, but Denise had already turned away. Threats. Lies. Layers of control masquerading as protection. She wasn't interested in justifications anymore. She wanted answers. And she wanted Ava. But nothing in this twisted narrative was that simple. Later that day, as the sun sank behind the treeline and the edges of her world seemed to blur, Denise received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was digitally altered, mechanical, but the message it carried was anything but vague. "You've been given enough breadcrumbs," it said. "Stop now and you stay safe. Keep digging, and the next child won't come back at all." The line went dead. She tried calling it back, nothing. She contacted the police again, no help. She didn't have enough evidence, they said. Nothing that proved a crime. Nothing they could act on. But it was a threat. A real, personal threat against children. Against her. And no one would do anything. Denise was spiraling, trapped between the reality she thought she knew and the nightmare that was taking its place. She could feel eyes on her. When she walked into the grocery store, she noticed a man in a gray hoodie at the entrance and again in the parking lot, still there when she exited. Her mail began arriving already opened. Her laptop, which she had used to access the flash drive, began glitching, files disappearing one by one as though someone, somewhere, was scrubbing them remotely. And then came the envelope. No return address. No postmark. Just a single photograph inside, printed on glossy paper. It was her and Ava, sitting on a bench from a few years ago. But Ava's face was crossed out with thick black marker. On the back, a message was scrawled in the same red ink. "You raised her. Now you can lose her." And that was when Denise knew. Whoever these people were, whatever program they belonged to, they were watching her not just now, but always. Every memory she thought she had made with Ava, every milestone, every birthday, it had all been monitored, evaluated, recorded. She wasn't just part of a study. She was the study. And Ava was the variable. The living, breathing test subject in a long game no one ever told her she was playing. But if Denise backed off now, if she played it safe, then all of it would vanish again. And maybe this time so would she. The hardest part came that night, when she had to confront someone she never thought she'd suspect, Alex. Her ex Ava's supposed father figure. They hadn't spoken in over a year, but Denise found herself parked outside his apartment, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. She didn't want to believe he had anything to do with this. But too many things weren't adding up. Why had he suddenly pulled away when Ava turned 9? Why had he never wanted full custody? And why, when she mentioned Ava going to therapy last year, had he insisted she wasn't ready to hear the truth? She marched up the stairs and knocked, bracing herself. Alex opened the door, surprised but not shocked. He looked tired, older, but his eyes betrayed something. When she brought up Ava, his shoulders tensed. When she asked about the adoption, he claimed he remembered nothing strange. But when she mentioned the name, Eliza, he didn't flinch. "You're not supposed to know about her," he said softly. Denise froze. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice suddenly hollow. "I got a call too," Alex admitted. "Years ago. Before Ava could even talk. They told me to play my role and never ask questions. They said you'd be monitored, and if I interfered, they'd take her away." Denise's knees buckled slightly. She stared at him, furious. "And you listened?" He looked away. "I thought I was protecting her," he murmured. "And you." It was too much. The betrayal cut deeper than any threat. This wasn't just a random experiment she was roped into. Everyone around her had been complicit. People she trusted. People she loved. They'd known something. Maybe not everything, but enough. And now she was alone. Except not entirely. Because before she could leave, Alex handed her something. An old notebook, Ava's. One he'd kept hidden for years, afraid of what it meant. Inside were drawings, dozens of them. Rooms filled with monitors. People with no faces. Symbols. One image repeated over and over, a red door. And beneath each one, Ava had written in shaky handwriting. She said not to tell Mom. Denise's breath caught in her throat. Someone had been speaking to Ava, guiding her, manipulating her. And Ava had kept it secret. The thought crushed her. But worse, it pointed to a terrifying truth. Someone had been pulling strings not just around Denise, but directly within Ava's mind. The decision now wasn't just whether to pursue the truth. It was whether to do so at the risk of her daughter's sanity or her life. And even more terrifying, what if Ava didn't want to be found? What if she'd been conditioned not to? Denise didn't sleep that night. Her body was still, but her mind raged, unraveling years of memories that no longer felt like her own. The pages of Ava's notebook were seared into her thoughts. Those strange symbols, the red door, the faceless watchers. All this time, she'd assumed this was personal, that someone had targeted her or Ava or their family for a reason. But now it was feeling much bigger. Something coordinated. Systemic. The word experiment kept echoing in her mind, but she had no idea what kind. And who was she? Who had been speaking to her daughter without her knowing? By morning, Denise had made up her mind. She was done tiptoeing around the truth. She drove straight to the last place she ever thought she'd return to, her old university. Back then, she was young, eager, a psychology major who had no idea how deep academic funding could go or what happened behind closed research lab doors. But now, as she walked the familiar brick paths, she wasn't here for nostalgia. She was here because of something Eliza once mentioned during one of her vague, carefully worded conversations, a project from decades ago called Continuum. A long-term developmental study sponsored by a private research firm, quietly embedded into adoption agencies and foster programs. Children were placed not by compatibility, but by design. By criteria. Ava had been one of them. Denise's stomach turned as she marched into the psychology building. She still had access to the alumni database and used it to search for professors from her time. One name stood out. Dr. Malcolm Reed. He had supervised a mysterious graduate study during her junior year, one that no one had been allowed to participate in unless they signed strict NDAs. He was still listed as emeritus faculty, though officially retired. His office, surprisingly, was still intact. The nameplate was faded, the door cracked open. Inside, the shelves were dusty, but the desk had fresh papers, recent mail. Someone was still using the space. That someone wasn't Dr. Reed. Denise barely had time to register the face that turned toward her when she stepped inside. It was a woman, tall, mid-40s, sharp eyes. Not a stranger. Her mind searched for the name, and then it hit her like a slap. Sarah, the social worker who'd overseen Ava's placement. Denise had only met her once, for an hour, when Ava was first brought into her home. She hadn't thought about her since. "You shouldn't be here," Sarah said flatly, standing up and blocking the desk. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." Denise's voice was low, steady. "You're part of it." Sarah didn't deny it. She simply exhaled, as if tired. "You were never supposed to get this far," she said. "You weren't supposed to remember me. But you were one of the stronger candidates. That's why you were chosen." "Chosen?" Denise snapped. "You put a child in my home like a lab rat. What is this? What were you doing to her?" Sarah paused, something flickering behind her eyes. "It's not what you think. Ava's not being harmed. She's being observed. Enhanced even. The continuum isn't about trauma. It's about adaptation. We study behavioral growth, environmental shifts, control variables. You were selected because of your own childhood profile. It's generational data mapping. You were never just a foster mother. You were part of the model." Denise's breath caught. She felt dizzy. Her fingers curled into fists. "You studied me too?" Sarah stepped forward, not aggressive but firm. "You still are part of it. And right now your emotional response is being measured. You have to understand this is bigger than you, than Ava. There are thousands of continuum children across the country. We've been collecting data for years. And you poking around now jeopardizes all of that." Thousands. That word thundered through her chest. This wasn't a rogue experiment. It was a full-scale operation, woven into the very systems meant to protect the most vulnerable: foster care, adoption services, public schools. How many parents had no idea their children were being used as case studies in a psychological experiment masked as benevolence? Denise could hardly breathe. "Where's Ava?" she whispered. Sarah's face hardened. "She's with others like her. That's all I can tell you. If you walk away now, you'll get her back. No questions. No consequences. But if you keep digging, she disappears. And this time, permanently." Denise turned and walked out without another word. Back in her car, she sat in stunned silence, staring at her hands. Her whole body trembled with adrenaline, grief, fury. Thousands of children. This wasn't just about her and Ava anymore. This was national. And someone had to expose it. She glanced in her rearview mirror, and that's when she saw him. A figure in a dark SUV, parked across the lot, engine idling, sunglasses reflecting her windshield. The same SUV she'd seen in her neighborhood the past few nights. They weren't just watching anymore. They were closing in. But as the panic surged, so did her resolve. This wasn't just about getting Ava back. It was about stopping something much bigger. About making sure no other parent woke up one day and realized their child was never truly theirs. And that they were never, ever free. Except, even as she started the car and pulled out, she didn't realize the worst betrayal was still ahead. Because the person who had handed her Ava's original file, who encouraged her to dig deeper, who pretended to be on her side, wasn't a victim. He was part of it too. And she'd already let him back into her life. Denise stood at the edge of the compound, her breath shallow, heart slamming against her chest as if it were trying to escape her body. The facility had no signs, no guards, just a long gravel road leading up to a series of low buildings surrounded by trees. The GPS coordinates had been buried in the metadata of an old email, one of the first she'd received from Eliza. It took her days to crack it, but once she saw the string of numbers, something in her gut told her it wasn't random. And now, standing there in the fading daylight with dusk pulling long shadows across the gravel, she knew she had arrived at the place where all the lies were born. This was the continuum's real nerve center, Not a lab or a foster agency, but something in between, a ghost facility built to stay invisible. She pushed the gate. It creaked but wasn't locked. Cameras followed her every move, but no alarm went off. No one stopped her. That made her more nervous than if someone had. Denise stepped through the gate and moved quietly across the grounds, passing a playground with unused swings swaying gently in the breeze, an empty cafeteria with plates still sitting on stainless steel counters, and then finally, a building with lights on. She hesitated, then stepped inside and found Ava. The girl was sitting at a long table, headphones over her ears, eyes closed. Around her were other children, about the same age, all quietly engaged in activities that looked innocent on the surface, coloring, typing on laptops, watching muted screens, but something about it felt off. Too synchronized. Too quiet. Denise's heart cracked and swelled at once. She called out softly, "Ava." Her daughter turned. Her eyes blinked, confused, then focused. "Mom." The word was fragile, unsure, but real. Denise rushed to her, grabbing her into an embrace, trying to control her tears.
But the moment didn't last.
A slow clap echoed from the doorway behind her. Denise turned sharply. Dr. Malcolm Reed stepped into the room, wearing the same ivory lab coat she remembered from college. His face was older, more hollow, but unmistakably familiar. "I didn't expect you to get this far," he said, almost with admiration. "But I suppose I should have. You were always the anomaly in our control group." Denise narrowed her eyes. "You did this. You built all of this."
Why?
What did you want from her? He walked in calmly, clasping his hands behind his back. From her? Nothing. She was one of hundreds. But from you? Insight. You were the last generation variable. You weren't supposed to keep her this long. The data wasn't meant to stretch into adolescence. But then something strange happened. She bonded. You bonded. And that ruined the trajectory. It forced us to pivot. Denise held Ava tighter. "So you just take her back like she's a file in a system? You don't get to decide that. She's not your experiment." Reed tilted his head. "That's where you're wrong. The moment you signed those foster papers, you entered a program you didn't understand." Ava was never off the record. She was always monitored, always tagged, always analyzed. This isn't kidnapping. It's a recall. Before Denise could react, a side door burst open. Sarah, the social worker, entered, only this time not alone. Behind her was a man Denise hadn't seen in years. Her ex-husband, Michael, the same man who had walked out on them just as Denise was struggling with Ava's early years. He'd left suddenly, no explanation, no custody fight, just vanished. Denise felt like the ground was slipping out from under her. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. Michael looked at her, guilt and resolve battling in his expression. "I never left," he said. "I was reassigned. You weren't supposed to know. I was meant to monitor you, make sure the bond didn't interfere with the projections. But then I saw what they were doing to her. And to you. And I couldn't be part of it anymore. I tried to pull out, to disappear. But they never let me go. They said if I didn't help bring her back now, they'd erase you both." Denise backed away from all of them, shielding Ava behind her. "You lied to us. You pretended to love her, me. All of this was just part of their game." Michael shook his head.
No.
"I did love you. That's what broke the model. That's what made me a liability. I'm not here to take her. I'm here to help you escape." Dr. Reed laughed, dry and sharp. "There is no escape. This facility is off-grid, buried under layers of clearance. You're not getting out, not unless we let you." Denise looked around. The children were watching now, some confused, others eerily calm. "So, what, you just erase us? Start over?" she spat. "You think no one will notice?" Reed's smile faltered. "That's the beauty of a system. No one ever has." And then, without warning, Ava spoke. But not like before.
She didn't just call out.
She repeated something, in a flat, almost robotic voice. Continuum Protocol 7. Directive breach logged. Initiating phase transfer. Her eyes glazed for a second, then focused again. Reed's face turned pale. "What did you say?" he asked, voice sharp. But Ava didn't respond. She looked up and smiled, not at him, but at Denise. "I remembered," she said softly.
"What you told me."
"That I always had a choice." The lights flickered. Sirens began to hum low in the distance. Reed's composure broke. She triggered it. She was never supposed to have access to that override.
Denise stared, stunned.
What override? Sarah rushed to the control panel on the wall, typing in a flurry, but the screen glitched. Red code filled the monitor. Ava had done something, but not alone. Somewhere in the network, someone had helped her. Someone inside. And that's when the final twist hit like a thunderclap. Eliza, Denise's former friend, the one who'd warned her subtly, given her clues, then vanished, had never been outside the program. She was inside it, deep inside. But she wasn't working for Reed. She'd been working against him the whole time. Embedded as an analyst, she had slowly seeded backdoors into the system, enabling a handful of Continuum kids to gain awareness, to regain control. Ava was one of them. The others were watching now, their own triggers silently awakening. Chaos erupted. Doors unlocked. Lights flashed. Sirens blared full force. Denise grabbed Ava's hand and ran, Michael trailing behind as they dodged through hallways now filling with frightened staff. She didn't know what they'd unleashed, but for the first time, it wasn't fear she felt. It was power. It was hope. And as they burst through the gates, escaping into the night, she knew the truth was finally coming to the surface. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the Continuum wasn't shutting down. It was evolving. Months later, the world outside kept moving like nothing had ever happened, as if the events Denise lived through had been swallowed by the quiet churn of everyday life. The headlines never carried the word Continuum. No reporters knocked at her door. No whistleblower exposés broke on mainstream media. It was like the entire facility had never existed, like every file, every child, every test had been scrubbed from the surface of the earth. And yet, Denise knew better. She remembered the escape. She remembered Ava's transformation. And most of all, she remembered what it felt like to see a system built on silence finally lose control. Now she and Ava lived under new names in a sleepy town tucked along the edge of the Oregon coastline. There were no cameras here. No glass walls. Just wind and gulls and the echo of waves crashing against the rocks below. It was the kind of quiet that had once terrified her. But now, it felt like sanctuary. Denise had found part-time work at a local bookstore, the kind of place where the cash register still chimed like it was from the 1950s, and the smell of old paper felt like a hug from the past. She didn't talk much to the locals, but they were kind, and they didn't ask questions. Ava, now going by Ellie, was enrolled in a small school with only one classroom per grade. She smiled more these days. Her shoulders relaxed. The strange moments, the glitches, the repeating phrases, the long stares at static on the television, those had mostly stopped. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, Denise would wake to find her daughter standing by the window, eyes fixed on the stars like she was waiting for something to return. Denise never interrupted. She just waited with her, letting the silence between them say everything that words couldn't. Back in the city, what was left of the Continuum had fractured. Dr. Malcolm Reed was presumed dead, though no official record confirmed it. Some said he'd been taken down by a rival agency. Others believed he'd gone underground, using his network to rebuild in the shadows. But to Denise, he wasn't the real threat anymore. The system that built him, the one that allowed children to be monitored, manipulated, measured like data points instead of human beings, that system was still alive in quieter ways. In every school security camera, every smart tablet handed out by corporate-funded programs, every background check that went a little too deep, that realization stayed with her like a splinter just beneath the skin. Not enough to stop her from living, but enough to remind her never to trust the surface of things. Michael never followed them. Whether he was caught in the fallout or intentionally stayed away to protect them, Denise didn't know.
She didn't ask.
In her heart, she had buried him with the same weight as the betrayal he brought, loving and broken, remembered but no longer missed. Sarah, the social worker who had played both sides, sent one final package before she disappeared. No return address. Inside it was a flash drive, an old photo of Denise holding Ava as a toddler, and a handwritten note with one sentence. They were never supposed to feel love. It changed the algorithm. Denise never plugged the flash drive into anything. She buried it in the sand behind their home. Some doors didn't need reopening. Still, the questions never fully went away. Who else had escaped? Were other Continuum children out there, living false lives, waiting to awaken like Ava did? And if the system was designed to evolve, what form would it take next? Denise didn't have the answers, and she wasn't sure she wanted them. What she did know was that Ava, Ellie, was laughing again. She was drawing again. And sometimes when she dreamed, she talked in her sleep, not in code, not in patterns, but in stories. Simple, joyful, nonsensical stories like any child her age might tell. That more than anything gave Denise hope. One night, as they sat together watching the sun melt into the sea, Ava turned and asked, "Do you think they'll come back for me?" Denise paused, her throat tightening. She looked into her daughter's eyes and gave the only answer that mattered. "They can try, but they'll never take who you are." Ava nodded slowly and leaned her head on Denise's shoulder. And for the first time in a long time, they both felt safe. But miles away, deep within a server room humming in the basement of an anonymous skyscraper, a terminal blinked to life. A progress bar crawled across the screen beneath the words, "Recalibrating subject cohort." A list of names scrolled rapidly, then paused. One line stood still. Ellie Monroe, status anomaly. Tracking suspended. Override deferred. A new entry appeared beneath it. Next phase. Initiate outreach. Somewhere, the system was still watching. And this time, it had learned how to wait.